anyways, so one of our first topics are trends in public relations and advertising. What are some interesting things that you found based off of your research? Yeah, just go ahead and let's talk about it.
Well, Rachel, one thing that I found really interesting, I was looking on Forbes at a couple different articles, and I saw that one of the biggest trends going on right now in the marketplace is the use of infographics. So essentially, people don't really like to read statistics, they like to see it visually. So I know I'm definitely a visual learner, and that's something that I saw is very trendy right now.
That's awesome. I actually saw 3 of the articles I found said the same thing. They
Oh,
kept
wow.
promoting visual communication, so
That is important. Another trend that I saw coming up, and it's kind of been around, it really hasn't taken flight like it could, but I feel like in the next couple of years it's going to grow, is virtual reality. I found that off of a website on Google, just kind of talking about how more and more it seems to be kind of gaining some traction and whatnot, and then they say that believe by 2020 there'll be about a $30 billion revenue on virtual reality and incorporating that whether into gaming systems or possibly some sort of advertisements. So I would say virtual reality is definitely an upcoming trend to kind of be looking for. So,
Yeah, I would say kind of jumping off that a little bit. Another thing that's kind of cool is AI, which is like this artificial intelligence. A lot of companies are playing with this right now. And so actually I found on CNN, Hope King wrote this piece on Amazon. They're creating, it's kind of like a computer, but the idea of it is you're gonna leave it like on your coffee table or somewhere in the front of your house. When you walk in, you can say, Amazon, what's the AC at, and what's this, what are we having for dinner, and basically it's going to respond to you.
I've
So,
seen
and
that
it's going to
too.
adapt every day, so it knows when you're going to be there, and if you're not there, it's going to call you. So it's something that's very cutting edge right now.
And you kind of see it on your phone too,
Yeah.
like when your phone starts to track your normal routine. Has anyone seen that on their phone where it'll say, oh, just so you know, your average drive today is going to be a little bit longer because of a traffic accident. So I feel like we're kind of already starting to see some artificial intelligence, and then something like that will definitely, I don't know, increase it.
absolutely.
I guess another thing to just kind of add, which isn't a new developing trend, but I think more of social media will be integrated within businesses more and more every single year. And a huge thing within social media that I believe it was from Forbes, it was top 7 social media trends, is actually in-app functionality, so that you never have to actually leave the app itself. So it can be a little scary at times to just kind of understand that a company can provide that for their customers. But it's also a very cool tactic to take that things like that, like AI, can actually be incorporated within an actual app, so that you never have to leave the app.
Right.
So
That's really cool.
Kind of jumping off that, Mary Beth, another trend that I think will continue to grow is what I was reading in my research is omni-channeling. We saw that especially over the holiday with Black Friday and Thanksgiving Day shopping, how much customers are relying on retailers to have a strong media presence, so they're able to look at a product on their phone, to research it as they're standing in the store. So business2community.com provided a lot of information on that and how much companies are realizing that they're going to need to step up their game as far as omni-channeling goes for shoppers in the future.
That's awesome.
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
It's cool. One of the articles I read, it's entitled 7 Public Relations Trends to Watch in 2015. It's by Brian Greene. He was just kind of saying that he was just focusing on the visual content to tag on to that, and talking about having educational content is so huge. And we see that a lot in our classes, in research, that now we're tending to be more adding value to our customers instead of trying to sell things and push things. We're trying to be thought leaders and continue to educate, inform, update. And a survey in that same article said that 39% of respondents reported that educational video content is most effective. So it's a really effective tool to reach.
There's also a Google algorithm now that ranks blogs and other educational content above actual websites. So if a company doesn't create blogs, doesn't create those educational contents, they're not actually showing up on Google's research at all.
Right.
One thing
too that I've noticed going back to the visuals is a lot of people like to have a face of their company. So I was actually talking with Brianna earlier, and it's very trendy for especially like things in the fashion industry. Like Rimmel, as soon as you see that girl with the gap in her tooth, you know that that's what that commercial is going to be about, some sort of new makeup that came out. And a lot of brands nowadays are using that in their sort of trend to let them know it.
There's definitely a bigger emotional connection with images than with just text. I feel like people know that, but then it's definitely becoming, like you said, a bigger deal now.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned something about real-time marketing the other day. And I was just like reading in a similar article, it was just talking about like how it's so important when things are coming out as companies to be creating content and like images and stuff based off of like current events. So one of like the biggest things, it's also called, what is it, content jacking or something to that effect. Or like newsjacking, yes.
You just kind of jump on whatever's happening.
So it's like similar to real-time marketing.
Well,
so
especially because things change so quickly now. You see that in a lot of articles, just like you can't plan for events anymore because they're over and done with. So you have to jump on, you have to see whatever's trending or whatever happened, and then like find the best way to capitalize on that, whether through advertising or public relations, image control, or promoting. And then in an instant it's gone and you're already on to the next thing. So just an upcoming trend in general is like never resting, always constantly going to the next, which can be tiring, which is why you need a really strong team that can constantly help manage the different areas that you're trying to advertise in.
That's so true.
So actually, I had to pull this up because it was actually an email that Dr. Soda sent me. But jumping off of what you said, running back just a second, sorry, but so Mike Templeman, he wrote in Forbes about Google RankBrain, which is like their newest system. And just kind of jumping off this, they're actually calling it machine learning because like what it does is it reads through everything and then goes through your preferences on your computer. And it's really cool because like it doesn't work without a person monitoring it, but it does learn and update, and then the person monitoring it on Google will check off.
Right, and that's kind of just bouncing off what you were saying previously about artificial intelligence.
Right.
Is it's getting to that extent where Google's actually been jumping on it, not only just on a personal device, but on a larger scale of understanding your preferences and learning from those types of things.
Interesting.
That's so cool. I feel like one of like the conclusions like I read like from all the articles at the very end, and you had mentioned this the other day, they were like continue to learn, like increase like your education. In one article in PR Crossing, it just was titled The Future Trends in Public Relations Employment. It was saying like, you know, talking about continuing your education, like maybe considering getting an MBA to kind of like widen your skill set and having like a business understanding. I thought that was pretty interesting because we're not necessarily told that. We're told continue, like go do stratcoms like in a master's. And a lot of like professionals are encouraging like a more MBA business route to have their understanding walking into it.
Yeah, that does make sense because when I was thinking about going for master's programs, we're told all the time in every single class that everything becomes obsolete within a few seconds. Like especially in our industry. So we get a textbook and by the next week it's completely obsolete. So what's the point of taking a master's degree and wasting all that time and money when it's going to become obsolete in less than a few months? So getting a business degree that has those foundations and that platform at least will set you in that right direction.
And then to stay up to date on communications and new marketing and ad by taking online courses like Linda, signing up and like kind of stay up to date there because you do need to. There's definitely a lot of new areas of technology that you always need to explore, but you can kind of do that more like through MOOCs or something on your own and then have your master's like you were saying in business.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I know like from personal experience, like this past semester I went to an AAF conference, which is the American Advertising Federation, and all of the like leading advertising people that were there, and I mean there were people from Ogilvy, people from just some of the top agencies. They didn't have ad PR degrees, they had MBAs, they had business degrees, and they had taught themselves.
Okay. So guys, did y'all find any interesting research or examples on the topic of staying current in emerging technology?
Well, one thing that I found really interesting, looking at one of Shift Communications articles, was actually on Snapchat. So this is more relevant to once you're in the actual communication career. But it was talking about just having constant upgrades, whether if you have an app or just within your whole marketing strategy. So a good example they had on there was like Snapchat, which is such a simple, you send a picture and you send it to your friends. People of all ages now are starting to get it. I know my mom has one.
Wow.
And so one thing that I know a lot of people are really excited about is how they now have where you like different filters, where you can have like a flower pot coming out of your head. And that was just a simple upgrade. So people are talking about the upgrade, and that just, it's a good way to get brand awareness to get your app out there. And more people are going to be downloading the app because they want to see what they look like when they're an old lady, stuff like that. So definitely constant upgrades. Yeah, interesting.
I actually asked several professors here, Dr. Silva in particular, and just asked him like how he stays current with emerging technologies and what he would suggest. And so he said definitely just constantly researching, but then another really simple way, but I think it's important, is following different companies on Twitter, and that's kind of the main social media feed that he suggested. But basically because there's constantly new things, so if you want like an instant something is being released or an update on technology, getting that instantly and checking that constantly is really important. Twitter just implemented a new platform called Twitter Moments, which is basically the top trends that are really easily accessible, one button, kind of like in a magazine format that makes it really easy to read. So like when you're getting that cup of coffee in the morning and you're wanting to know what's happening in the world, you just click that and you get to know everything.
That's awesome.
That's super cool. It is. I'll jump in. So I started researching a little bit on the Internet of Things. Right. IoT. So speaking just about our generation and the generations to come, I mean, they're so connected with their phones, always in their hand, their tablets, all of it. So Jacob Morgan, he writes for Forbes, says that simply put, this is the concept of basically connecting any device with an on or off switch to the internet. This includes everything from cell phones, coffee makers, washing machines, headphones, lamps, wearable devices, anything you can make. So I think it's really neat because we were actually talking with Mary Beth the other day, talking about the Apple Watch compared to like their pen. But I mean, you can see how people are starting to use watches to, check sports games. They have the Google Glass. So I think there's just so many trends right now with IoT, and it's just going to continue to evolve.
Right. Based upon some of the research that I've done from Forbes, there was an article called "Learn, Unlearn, and Relearn," and I think the most basic way for us to keep updated is literally just to educate ourselves and to be open-minded about everything that we're going into. I think there's so many times in our current state where we'll have people that are very closed-minded to other opinions or to other tactics, but if we're not being open-minded and if we're not understanding that things become obsolete, we will never understand the true extent of learning. Just like one small statistic, there was, from that same article, it said that 40% of things that we learn in classes will become obsolete as we reach for jobs and that aren't even created yet. So it's one of those types of things that we're kind of studying for a job that we don't even know.
Yeah.
So just to kind of stay current and to keep up with trends and all of those different types of things.
And a great way to keep up with trends, I know you mentioned that Silva had said always doing research, and one way is through Twitter. But another way that I've kind of seen mentioned a couple of times is you had mentioned following companies, but also following a company's like newsletter. I know PRSA or Content Marketing Institute, a couple others that I follow will send a newsletter every couple of days with a bunch of links through different articles just mentioning like what's happening with current companies and there may be like their PR crises or how they're doing well in the PR world or what's in new emerging technology and how it's used. And so that's one of the best ways that I found to kind of stay up to date because I can easily scroll through and look to see what the titles are, and then if I see something that I haven't seen before, I'm like, oh, I'm actually not really sure what that's about, whether it's Periscope or another new emerging social media, I can kind of click on it and get a link that better explains what's happening or what it's
Right.
about. So,
That's awesome.
and it is just like we've all been saying,
Yeah.
just constant research
Mm-hmm.
because it does, it changes so quickly, and a textbook won't be useful
Yeah.
because that's old within a year. So it's always being online and just seeing what your friends are talking about, seeing what people are hashtagging, what's trending, looking through companies and seeing what they're implementing in their business strategies. It's just a lot of digging and being
Yeah.
very conscious of it too. Like
Yeah.
you got to put a lot of work into it, but
Mhm.
it's worth it in the end.
Yeah.
So
I think going along with what you're saying too, as far as staying current, as long as you have an appropriate budget planned out within your company, it's really good to test and to try different, different strategies. Who would have thought, 20 years ago that you could talk to your mom through your watch?
Yeah.
That's something that would almost, you'd think you'd see it on like the Jetsons or Futuristic, because it just sounds
That's so
unnecessary,
crazy.
but
Yeah.
maybe one day we need a talking pen or
Yeah.
something crazy. So to have that within your budget and to test and to
really
try
cool.
that is something that
Yeah.
That's so
Interesting.
Kind of like to support both of your points, an article by Patrick Gray entitled 10 Ways to Stay on Top of Emerging Technology. He said exactly what y'all said. He's like, watch the consumer space. Like, watch what consumers are doing, like what their interests are, like what they're trending towards. And like, again, test the gadgets, like constantly explore and learn them so you're familiar with them and like how like you respond to them, and kind of similar to like, okay, this is how they view it. So like constantly like, look what the consumers are doing, like look what the market is going. And that's a great way to stay on top of like the emerging trends.
Yeah.
So I think it's also cool to tag on to what you said. I found an article and it said 65% of people use social media to like learn, about brands and different things. So kind of tagging on to like Twitter, like
Yeah,
social media is a great way to learn.
definitely.
So yeah.
And I think it's important to remember, as we're going into the workplace, to, I guess, the importance of companies having a constantly updated social media, because we're all kind of working together and learning together, so to make sure that everybody is keeping up to date with what they're doing and letting people know.
it's a good point.
Great. Hey guys, did y'all find anything interesting on the topic of big data and how that relates to our future in the marketplace?
One huge thing that I found was actually from Forbes. It was 4 ways big data will change every business, so it's not just within advertising and public relations. But a huge thing that they had, there's a case study done with John Deere where they're actually starting to put sensors inside tractors so that it can actually say how would be better to do all your field, when to do to harvest, and all of those types of things. And then sending that data back to the headquarters so that they know how to better fit their customers' needs and all those types of things. From like a personal aspect, looking in at that, I think that's a huge way for us to get a huge initiative on figuring out how we should be educating ourselves with big data and how we can expand our minds on how to use that. But also, as we're going into the workforce, we also need to keep in mind that big data plays a huge part in how we get jobs. So people can like know a lot about us before we even walk into the room, just based upon data that they've gotten already. So just like from a personal aspect and also from a larger corporate aspect, it plays a huge part in.
And then going off what you said about how it helps us kind of like determine the needs of the audience, I found an article called How Big Data Makes PR More Human, and that's basically everything it was talking about. And it was kind of making a joke that you think big data like is a lot of math, and as like PR and communications, we're kind of known to not, I don't know, maybe specialize in mathematics as much as others, but then how important it is that we learn how to analyze this data that we're getting, because this is helping us best connect with our customers, because we can see in what areas, like what social medias they're using, or what kind of like, whether they're through email or TV advertising, maybe radio, Spotify, like kind of finding the best way to reach them, and it makes PR a lot more like connected to our audience than before, when it was just kind of like randomly, I don't know, putting content wherever and hoping that it hit home somewhere. And so big data is definitely important for PR. I know it can seem scary, maybe not as fun as some of the creative campaigns that we really like enjoy doing more. Ultimately, if we kind of leave it out and we don't take the time to analyze it, we are losing a big way to connect with everyone we're trying to reach.
Yeah.
And so it's important to kind of take hold of it. So
Going right after that, Adweek did an interview with Kevin Ackroyd of Oracle Marketing, and it was really interesting because he talked all about how big data is impacting advertising and PR. And he said that it's not about like the fact that it's so much data, it's about the right data, activated the right way in the right channels and at the right time. So I think when big data was like first introduced, it was kind of like this beast and people were just like big data, everything, but what do you actually do with all of that data? You have to have people who know how to use it correctly and make sure it's not, we're not just using everything, we're using like the right pieces in order to better communicate to the market and that kind of thing. So he said something really interesting. He said marketers should be hiring and utilizing analysts, but as importantly, they should have to be what the best ones have always been, great brand and customer experience champions, which I think is really interesting. So, because I think in one aspect, big data can kind of seem like it's taking over the work of the analytics people or even what we do, but we go hand in hand. So everything that we're learning about, like knowing our brand and knowing our consumer goes right along with, now we just have this tool that is big data, and so we're able to know even more about our consumer. So just like you said, making sure that we know what big data is and how to use it, I think will make us really marketable as we look for jobs in the future.
Going off with what you're saying too, one thing that I think will really help us as far as our career goes is like you said, if we really know how to narrow down and figure out exactly what data that we're looking for and being able to organize that, it's going to be cost effective. I mean, it's all about the knowledge and having the skill set, whereas before research and narrowing things out, that can cost money through different, I mean, I don't even know the technology that they would use prior to this, but definitely, cost effective, it'll help a lot.
So kind of this funny thing about using big data, you can kind of see in some articles or just in some companies how they don't fully understand it or they're trying to find new ways to use it. And so New York Times actually covered Yahoo, the CEO of Yahoo, Marissa Mayer. She likes to use big data to actually do her quarterly performance reviews of her employees.
Wow.
So basically everyone
Wow, terrifying.
right. So everyone in the company gets all the work they've been doing gets put into this system that they're using, and it grades them 1 through 5. And what she's finding is that when people see their grades, they no longer want to work with some of their coworkers. Like they will switch out of projects because they don't want to get a lower grade.
Wow.
In an article I found on the Motley Fool, which I think is such a funny name for a website, it said that they also don't just like analyze, because we know like Facebook likes, clicks on the internet. They went in to say it's like even generated from like traffic sensors, like sales figures, small businesses, and like all these other little things, and that goes into this like big pool of information that as a company it shows you and gives you information about like what is positively impacting your brand, like, and I thought that was so interesting to back up like what we're saying, like every little thing like in the internet, and even like now because we live, like you were saying, in such an interconnected world, like everything we do, like brands and organizations and companies like take in and filter through.
Yeah, I do think that just to kind of build off of everyone's current statements, one huge thing that we really need to think about when we're going into anything with big data is protection for our customers, because like things like Home Depot's breach in credit card security and Target as well. That was huge and completely belittling to the company. So also just like keeping in mind that as we go into the field that big data, yes, has a huge reign over what we're doing day-to-day basis, and it will continue to grow, but like you said, it needs to be harnessed and it needs to be protected and maintained so that we understand where our morals lie and what is immoral from that point on.
That's a really good point, and it actually goes along with one of my examples from Business Insider. So they gave an example about how in one of the Super Bowls, we used big data to analyze the actual engagement of the Super Bowl, whereas before, they would say like Coca-Cola was the most important ad. But so I'll read it directly. It says, in Super Bowl XL6, whatever that is, we use big data to analyze the actual engagement of all the Super Bowl ads during the game. The traditional measure, so what they used before, was just what USA Today said. So essentially, the big data is a lot more accurate than what just one source was saying prior, because actually USA Today suggested that Coca-Cola had done poorly, when actually, according to the big data study, that Coca-Cola was in the top of the charts for all of them. So that's through like Facebook things and different social media things. So it's important to definitely protect, our clients and people that are working with us.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
Yeah. Going off of that too, also, I read this article by Melanie Hicken talking about last year how the Fair Crediting Reporting Act, it's this whole huge system that was passed, basically that blocked marketers from using people's credit scores and big data, because people were basically taking advantage of that and offering these insane rates on loans for different things, and just taking advantage of people.
Yeah,
That
it's
makes
almost
sense,
like a
yeah.
discrimination in a way.
Right.
Like we got away from like different sex discrimination or different color discrimination to now like discrimination through big data.
Right.
Like I guess like morally, from my perspective, where's the point that we stop and kind of understand where God wants us to bring big data in this type of field.
Okay guys, from your research, did y'all find any cool things about the roles of collaboration, communication, and innovation in our marketing and ad PR world?
Well, I mean, I found a lot just from one simple article that was titled, hold on for 1 second, 10 Communication Secrets of Great Leaders in Forbes, and was fantastic article, absolutely phenomenal. And it was a very long, extensive article, but it went bit by bit of what exactly we need to be doing on a day-to-day basis to become a great leader and not just an okay leader. A huge thing that they wanted to bank on was becoming a great communicator, not just a talker. So us just talking right now, that's nice to have, but really in the long run, it's nonverbal communication. It's a lot of how do you collaborate with your peers, how do you innovate, and all those different types of things. And mentally, how do you communicate to even yourself? And
Interesting.
communication doesn't technically even just mean like talking. It's really even listening. So it's Catherine is talking and I'm listening to her because it's a good communication technique for me to then bounce off ideas off of her in the
People
long run.
trust you more too if they feel like
Exactly.
you're listening to them.
Exactly, and that was another point that they made was it's very people don't just trust. You need to gain their trust, and a great characteristic of a good leader is knowing that to be true. That you can't just assume that people are going to trust you. You need to build that trust, and then you can ask for favors, and then you can tell them things like that. There was a quote in here that I seem to have lost, but it was talking about how because of that trust, you're able to give knowledge to people. Let me see if I can find it.
Well,
'Cause
and
it was
trust
really
is
good.
like such an important part of collaboration too. And we need collaboration in PR. I mean, you need everybody around you to help like create these campaigns. I know you come up with ideas better when you have someone else to bounce them back. And if there's that element of trust missing from it all, then you really can't grow and you can't explore different ideas the way you want to if you're holding back. So
I was
think
actually
trust is a big
reading on
part.
Oxford Journal's roles of collaboration and innovation, like and implementing that in your public relations career, and it came up with some really good points. Like, are you keeping your competition out of the media? Is your PR team forming valuable relationships? Do you work well as a team? Is your are you team building your brand? Are you reaching your target? Always make sure that you're setting goals and either reaching them or exceeding them. Things like that will help you. Another thing that I found interesting in Business Insider was that 33% of users follow celebrities, and so as far as collaboration to really pay celebrities to post stuff about your brand or your product, and that will really help people. In your public relations.
I have a really cool example of collaborating within the marketplace. So this kind of was a different train of thought than what I was originally going on, but it was talking about Airbnb, which I'm sure y'all have heard of, which is where people put their apartments and stuff. It's I have a bed you can sleep on, or a couch you can sleep on, where people traveling and going through the country.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it can respond and get it for a great deal. And they're actually taking a lot of business away from some prominent hotels. And this article by Shift Communication, it said that a great model for collaborating between businesses would be for say the Marriott Hotel to offer the certified Marriott providers on Airbnb, which was homeowners who engage Marriott to inspect their Airbnb room, provide cleaning services, and promote the room on Airbnb for either free or a portion of the revenue. And so it's a great way for Marriott to kind of get on board and be I'm going to collaborate with you,
That's a
but also
great idea.
kind of get some of the benefits. So I thought it was interesting.
It's a great little collaboration tool between business to business customer.
Yeah.
I did find the quote. It was people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yes, that's so good.
It's right? Yeah, it's so deep, and it just kind of goes off the fact that people don't care about what you know until they trust you.
Right.
So
So good.
So in many cases, it's very collaborative.
Oh, I mean, that's a lot of
fan.
sense.
I'm a fan. Okay. Do y'all want to continue to talk about this or move on to the last one?
Well, I feel we could have more to say, but that last one is such a good conversation that
Let's yes. Okay guys, so from all the research and just kind of what we've learned in classes, and after this discussion, what are some ways that we can prepare for the future in our marketing and PR digital world?
should we just go around the circle? Should we all kind of have things to talk about?
Yeah, go for it.
I guess we'll begin. Okay. So kind of just looking through everything and all the different articles as well as what's been said. Something that I feel is very important to keep open-minded for the future is to kind of not so much focus on generational ages anymore, but to kind of focus on passions and interests as the target. I remember last semester, along with Mary Beth, we read The Gen Z Effect, which was a very popular book that came out, and a big part of it was talking about how Generation Z, this up-and-coming generation, is it's kind of delving away from the typical generation, which is ages. You think, okay, between age here and here is millennials, between ages here and here is Gen X, but what Gen Z is more about is passions and interests coming together, because
That's really cool.
now we're kind of losing that age gap as everything is going online. We're a lot more interconnected. There isn't as much of a gap. So instead now when we want to target, we should focus on what people are interested in and kind of go find our target audience. These people are interested in social media, we'll target them, or interested in knitting, we'll target them, instead of going for the specific age groups. And so that was a big thing that I think to help prepare for the future we should kind of keep in mind. Another thing, we mentioned this earlier, is just real time.
Yeah.
We had said that it's just always looking to promote things, to advertise what's happening currently as opposed to planning ahead, because it's kind of hard to plan ahead now. And so just being open to, if something comes up, we have to jump on it, because a lot of times you hear about companies missing opportunities, and then some of these smaller companies are jumping on real time, and then they become they start to trend, and they kind of surpass because they're more open to look to see what's trending and to just hop aboard these already current big deals, instead of trying to plan things out so neatly. So I think we need to be aware of just looking to see what's happening in real time, and then always and constantly exploring new apps and technology, and we talked about that earlier, so we're not going to see much more about it, but just constantly looking to see what's coming out and how we could use it or implement it. I mean, even if it's something that doesn't take off as well as you would like, it never hurts to just explore and to kind of try some things out, because a big part of PR is trying and failing and trying again, learning and not learning and relearning or whatever. So just constantly exploring and looking for new ways to expand in everything that's coming.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Just throw that in there. So, I think just because we're all here marketing and ad PR, we've seen over the last 10 years how social media has kind of changed our own field in such a way. And so, kind of this thing right now that a lot of companies are working on kind of in the background that you don't see, Facebook's actually the leader in it. So what it is, and I think that's something that we need to be a little bit prepared for because it's going to change our jobs, is they have this project called, I assume it's called Aquila or Aquia. It's Aquila, I don't know. And so basically what it is it's like a mini airplane or satellite about the size of this table, and it's covered in solar panels. And the point of it is they want to send multiple ones of these up around the globe because they want to bring Wi-Fi and internet connection to the entire world for free. And there's plenty of companies working on this, and Facebook's actually going to test it out at the end of this year.
Cool.
And so I think what we're going to see is just a whole new influx of just people that we can communicate with and market to that we haven't been able to before. I mean, you see over in third world countries now how before we even send them water or food, we're sending them cell phones, we're sending them smartphones so that they can say, this is what I really need, and they text it to us. There are people paying for that. So I think there's going to be this whole new wave shortly that's just going to change marketing.
That's awesome. Really interesting.
Very cool. I think in a lot of the articles I read, and I kind of mentioned this the other day, like with our career, like in public relations, advertising, and marketing, there used to be like a clear line, and like this is like that, and that, and they were separate. And now they're very much blurred together. And a lot of what I noticed was they said like be very familiar and have knowledge in all three and a good grasp on all three, but be an expert in one, because now companies are looking to hire an expert like on a need basis. So like a project comes up, like okay, like do you want to come work for my company, work on this project, like for X amount of money for X amount of time that you work on it. So it's really encouraging, like focus on one skill set and like become an expert and really develop your gifting and ability in that. And kind of like what Mary Beth said, I'll let you go more in depth on that, but one thing I kept like seeing over and over again, they were like, this field, more than most any other field, is constantly progressing. So make sure you are being adaptable and flexible and not like just stuck in your ways. So continue, like we've all said, like learn and absorb, but mostly like learn the skill of ability. So that was cool.
Very good. One thing kind of going along with almost summarizing what all three of you have said is it's really important to stay in touch with the digital world. Always know what the next upcoming thing is. You always want to stay on top of that and make sure that you're aware of your surroundings. You don't have to be necessarily an expert on it, but you have to know. So even stuff that may seem over our heads, you just want to make sure that if you're sitting in an interview or if you're in a panel discussion that you can at least contribute and not sound like, oh, okay, because that's the whole point. We're communicators. We have to actually know what we're doing. One thing too that I know, yeah. Okay, that's so funny. One thing kind of ironic now is knowing your competition almost as much as you know about yourself. And so, strictly going into a job interview. Okay, I'm sorry. Make sure that you know everything that you're talking about within that company. Be an expert. Let's say I'm applying for Coke. I know everything. I know the history of Coke. I know all about their marketing. I know what's coming up, but also know everything about Pepsi, because if they're going to ask you questions, they're like, well, you know, Pepsi beat us this year in this subject. Well, they beat you in this because they did this on Facebook, or they did this on some social media site that Coke doesn't even know exists yet. So to always make sure that you're on top of your competition. I think you should go.
Also good. I'm learning so much just from this discussion. But two things that I thought were important to keep in mind as we're moving forward is just the importance of listening, which you already had so much input on that. But just a couple statistics, I guess, or numbers, facts that I found. Did you know that we derive 55% of messages' meanings from the speaker's facial expressions, 38% from how he says the message, and only 7% from actual words spoken. And so the kind of, I mean, I'm thinking like client meetings and things like that, and knowing our, like who we're talking to, like on a business basis, and making sure that we're listening, I guess. And because I think that's a skill, and it's not necessarily something that comes naturally. But moving on from that, I was talking to Dr. Silva again. He's a wealth of information, and he was just saying something that is taking the communications world by storm is disruption and innovation. And so I think just immersing ourselves in that like kind of mindset, like looking at something like how Netflix did with Blockbuster. Like they saw this dinosaur of a thing. All I knew growing up was Blockbuster, and then all of a sudden Netflix was on the scene. And having that mindset, like things that seem stationary, like don't have to be. And like even Uber, how they're taking over, how like taxis work, and that like whole system is just incredible. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more and more of that. So being on the lookout for ways that we can be disruptors and innovators, I guess. This is really cool. So I read Google added Uber to their Map app earlier this year. This is from omnichannelmedia.com, and has announced that 11 organizations, including United Airlines, Starbucks, Expensify, OpenTable, TripAdvisor, Time Out, Hyatt Hotels, and Resorts are all partnering with Uber.
A quick pause. Okay, so I feel like at this extent in our conversation, I'm kind of just reiterating what everyone else said. However, I'll just go back to some of the points that I brought up previously, which was continually learning, unlearning, and relearning new rules. And I mean new words as well, if that would work. So just like extending upon our knowledge at all times, and you know, not losing that passion that we have every single day as we go into school and all those types of things. Another thing is figure out and know how things work and learn how to implement them in every little aspect. I don't care what kind of industry you're going to go into, whether it be Coca-Cola or Pepsi or any of those types of industries. Know how they make their product. Know how technology works and how to implement that within that specific company. And lastly, just learn how to be a great communicator, not just a talker, and just putting yourself out there. Don't be afraid of people degrading you or belittling you for being younger than they are, or any of those different types of things. But really just keep your mind open, keep your thoughts open, and most of all, keep your heart open, because you never know where God's going to lead you in the long run.
That's right.
Amen.
Guys, it's been a great conversation with you all. Let's go.
Funny.
Storm the world.
Take over PR.